13 ships. That is all that remained against a terrifying armada of 333 enemy warships. It wasn't just a battle. It was a mathematical impossibility, a guaranteed execution that would erase an entire nation from history. Yet, this impossible clash became the most brilliant suicidal trap ever engineered. This is how you break an empire. The year is 1597. The Japanese war machine is ruthless, sweeping across the sea, leaving nothing but ash and blood in its wake. The Korean naval forces are annihilated, decimated by betrayal and terrible leadership. The defense of a nation is entirely shattered. Only one man could fix this broken shield: Admiral Yi Sun-sin, a commander previously tortured and stripped of his rank, now recalled in desperation. The king's order was clear: disband the remaining ships, retreat to the land forces. The war at sea is lost. But Yi Sun-sin refused. His response changed history. "Your Majesty, I still have 12 ships, and I am still alive." He miraculously found one more ship, 13 vessels, a laughable defense against a Japanese fleet darkening the horizon. The Japanese commanders were hungry for glory. They sought to crush this pathetic remnant and open the sea route to the capital. But they forgot one crucial rule of warfare: never underestimate a genius who has chosen the ground where he will die. Yi knew a head-on collision was mass suicide. He needed a force multiplier. He needed nature itself to become his weapon. He chose the Myeongnyang Strait, the roaring channel, a narrow, treacherous passage of water, notorious for its violently shifting tides. At its narrowest, the strait is barely 300 meters wide, a terrifying bottleneck that renders massive numbers completely useless. But the real weapon wasn't the width. It was the water. The current here rushes at a violent 10 knots, a boiling cauldron. And most importantly, the current changes direction every few hours. This was the mechanism of Yi's suicidal trap. The night before the battle, Yi gathered his terrified officers. He looked at men who believed tomorrow was their final day on Earth. He spoke words that echoed into eternity. "Those who seek death shall live. Those who seek life shall die." October 26th. The morning fog lifts. The ocean trembles. The Japanese Armada enters the strait. Over 300 ships, moving like a plague. The sheer psychological terror was overwhelming. The sound of thousands of enemy oars hitting the water, a drumbeat of doom. The Japanese were riding the favorable current. The tide was pushing them aggressively toward the tiny Korean line of defense. Panic seized the Korean vanguard. The 12 ships behind Admiral Yi began to slowly row backward, paralyzed by absolute fear. Admiral Yi was left entirely alone. One single flagship, standing against a tsunami of 333 heavily armed warships. It was the ultimate test of nerve. If he retreated an inch, the fleet would break. If he stayed, he faced the abyss. He dropped his anchor. The heavy chains locked the flagship in the boiling current. One wooden fortress holding the line. The Japanese ships rushed in like wolves, confident of an easy kill. They relied on close combat, boarding the enemy to slaughter the crew. But Yi's ship was an artillery fortress. He ordered the heavy cannons to fire. A deafening roar shattered the morning air. Cannonballs smashed into the wooden hulls of the Japanese vanguard. Wood splintered. Men screamed. The first enemy ship sank instantly. The Japanese commanders were shocked. They tried to swarm him, but the narrow strait forced them into a tight, chaotic cluster. Yi's crew fired relentlessly, portside, starboard, reloading in a frenzy of survival. They unleashed a storm of fire and iron, but one ship cannot hold an ocean. The enemy kept coming, wave after wave, closing the distance. The psychological pressure was unimaginable. Yi hoisted the command flag, ordering his terrified captains to join the fight. For an agonizing moment, no one moved. Finally, immense shame overcame their fear. 2 Korean ships pushed forward through the violent waters, joining their admiral's suicidal stand. The 3 ships formed an unbreakable wall. Firing massive artillery at point-blank range, the strait began to fill with broken wood and floating bodies. The Japanese commander, Kurushima, realized his numbers were useless here. His ships were bumping into each other, trapped in the bottleneck. He ordered his snipers to target Admiral Yi. Bullets rained down on the Korean flagship, striking the mast and the decks. Yi stood entirely exposed, calmly directing the artillery. His absolute lack of fear became a supernatural shield for his men. Still, the Japanese kept pushing. Their favorable current was strong. The sheer mass of their fleet was slowly crushing the Korean line. The battle hung on a knife edge. The Korean crews were exhausted. The cannons were dangerously hot. Destruction seemed inevitable. And then, the miracle of strategy occurred. The trap finally snapped shut. The roaring waters of Myeongnyang stopped. An eerie silence fell over the current. The ocean itself was holding its breath. Then, the tide violently reversed. The massive current shifted, rushing back against the massive Japanese armada. The hunter instantly became the hunted. The Japanese ships, packed tightly together, lost all control of their steering. The furious tide slammed the enemy ships into each other. Heavy hulls shattered. Oars snapped like twigs under the immense pressure. The entire Japanese formation collapsed into a chaotic, screaming pile of broken wood. Panic replaced their earlier arrogance. Now, the Koreans had the current behind them. Admiral Yi gave the final devastating order: advance and destroy them all. The 13 Korean ships pushed forward, riding the aggressive tide, their heavy cannons firing directly into the helpless, entangled enemy mass. It was no longer a battle. It was a mechanical slaughter. The Japanese ships couldn't retreat. The current locked them in the kill zone. The Korean cannons tore through the clustered enemy targets. A single shot could pierce through 2 or 3 Japanese ships at once. Kuroshima's flagship was obliterated. His body fell into the raging water, a massive blow to the morale of the invading empire. The Japanese soldiers, trapped on sinking vessels, tried to jump into the water, but the violent whirlpools dragged them down into the dark abyss. The ocean turned entirely red. The impenetrable armada, the pride of the Japanese empire, was being systematically erased by 13 ships. The Japanese commanders desperately tried to signal a retreat, but the roaring waters and the deafening cannon fire drowned out their commands. Ship after ship went down. The bottleneck of the Strait became a graveyard of massive proportions. The strategic brilliance was absolute. Yi Sun-sin didn't just fight the enemy. He used the enemy's massive weight as their own executioner. The remaining Japanese ships, battered and terrified, finally managed to break free from the whirlpools, fleeing back to the open sea. The roar of the cannons ceased. The smoke slowly cleared over the Myeongnyang Strait. Admiral Yi stood on his blood-soaked deck. 31 enemy warships were entirely destroyed, dozens more severely crippled. And the Korean losses? Not a single ship. 13 entered the abyss. 13 emerged victorious. It remains one of the most astonishing tactical achievements in military history, a triumph of pure intellect over overwhelming brute force. Let us analyze the profound lesson here. Strategy is not about counting your soldiers. It is about controlling the environment. The Japanese saw the narrow strait as a minor obstacle. Admiral Yi saw it as the ultimate weapon, an invisible fortress. By refusing to meet the enemy in the open ocean, Yi neutralized the Japanese advantage of numbers and their aggressive boarding tactics. He forced them to fight his war, on his terms, dictated by the brutal clock of nature. He understood that when facing impossible odds, you must transform your enemy's greatest strength into their fatal weakness. The massive size of the Japanese fleet, their pride and joy, became the exact reason they collided, tangled, and sank. But brilliant tactics mean nothing without the iron will of a leader. Yi's decision to drop his anchor and stand alone was the catalyst. Courage is contagious. By embracing death, he cured his army's paralyzing fear. He proved that the enemy could bleed. The psychological impact of Myeongnyang was earth-shattering. The invincible aura of the Japanese Navy was permanently broken. It halted the invasion. It secured the supply lines. It single-handedly breathed life back into a dying nation. History is often written by the victors, but true epics are written by the desperate, by those who refuse to surrender to the math. We often look for complex answers to survive a crisis. Yet, the Battle of Myeongnyang teaches us the power of absolute focus. 13 ships did not beat 300. A superior mind, weaponizing a roaring ocean, defeated a blind, arrogant empire. This is the essence of true strategy: finding the choke point, knowing the terrain, and possessing the terrifying resolve to hold the line. Admiral Yi Sun-sin wasn't just a naval commander. He was a master of human psychology and environmental warfare.
The Japanese thought they were sailing into a minor skirmish. They didn't realize they were stepping into a meticulously designed meat grinder. Even today, naval academies around the world study this singular clash. It is the gold standard of asymmetrical warfare. It answers the eternal question: what do you do when the world tells you it is completely over? You do not fold. You do not retreat, you find the narrowest path, and you make the enemy bleed for every inch. You calculate the wind, you study the tide, you turn the very earth beneath your feet into an active combatant. The Myeongnyang Strait still roars today, a violent, churning memory of the day the ocean swallowed an armada. It stands as a monument to the 13 fragile ships that refused to die, and the solitary genius who commanded the sea itself. The enemy believed their massive numbers granted them invincibility. They mistook scale for strength, a fatal historical arrogance. So the next time you are outnumbered, outgunned,
and entirely written off by the world. Remember the roaring channel. Remember the dark, churning waters of Myeongnyang. Remember the man who looked at an impossible horizon, tightened his grip on his sword, and used 13 ships to swallow an empire. This is Epic Sagas, where history is not just remembered, it is felt. Subscribe for more battles that shaped the destiny of mankind.